Have you ever helped someone without knowing they might one day change your entire life? Victor was just a poor fruit seller, struggling to survive each day. But one ordinary evening, he met a blind, disabled girl sitting alone by the roadside. He had no idea that one simple act of kindness would change his destiny forever. The evening sun slowly faded across the busy streets of Jos. Victor pushed his wheelbarrow, tired from a long day of selling fruits. Life had never been easy for him, but he carried his struggles with a humble and hopeful heart. As he turned a quiet corner, he noticed a young lady sitting helplessly on the roadside. Her hands searched carefully along the ground, as if she was lost, or looking for something she could not find. People passed by her, some staring, others ignoring her completely. Victor slowed down, then stopped. He walked closer and spoke gently. "Are you okay?" The girl turned toward the sound of his voice. Her eyes stared into emptiness, and Victor quickly realized she was blind. He also noticed her leg rested awkwardly beside her, showing she struggled to walk. I'm fine," she whispered, though her trembling voice said otherwise. Victor sat beside her. "My name is Victor, what's yours?" "Amara," she replied softly. Victor soon discovered Amara had been wandering alone for days. She refused to explain why she left home, but Victor didn't force her to speak. Instead, he helped her. He shared his fruits with her, found her a safe place to rest, and later allowed her to stay in his small rented room. Life was already difficult for Victor, yet caring for Amara never felt like a burden. Every evening, Victor described the sunset to her. He painted pictures of the sky using words, because she could never see them. For the first time in her life, Amara felt loved. One evening she asked quietly, "Victor, why are you helping me?" Victor smiled gently and replied, "Because kindness should never depend on someone's condition." Tears rolled down Amara's cheeks. Weeks passed, and slowly, friendship turned into love. Victor never saw Amara as disabled. He saw her as a strong woman, who only needed someone to believe in her. One day, with fear and hope mixed in his heart, Victor asked Amara to marry him. She was surprised, but she said yes. Their wedding was small and simple, held inside a humble church. There were no expensive decorations, no luxury outfits, just two hearts choosing each other against all odds. A few weeks after their marriage, Amara told Victor she wanted to visit her parents. Victor felt nervous. He feared they might reject him because he was poor. But Amara reassured him everything would be fine. When they arrived at the location she directed him to, Victor froze in shock. Standing before him was a massive mansion, surrounded by tall gates and security guards. Victor whispered softly, "I think we came to the wrong place." Amara smiled gently. "No, Victor, this is my home." The gates slowly opened. Servants rushed forward calling her name. Moments later, her parents ran outside, crying as they embraced her tightly. Victor stood speechless. Victor soon learned the truth. Amara was the only daughter of an extremely wealthy family. Despite growing up surrounded by riches, she felt emotionally unloved because of her disability. Feeling like a burden, she ran away searching for genuine love. And she found it in Victor. Instead of rejecting him, Amara's parents welcomed Victor warmly. They were deeply moved by how he cared for their daughter when nobody else did. Seeing his sincerity, they entrusted Victor with Amara's inheritance and accepted him fully into their family. But despite the sudden wealth, Victor remained humble. He continued helping people in need, remembering that kindness was what changed his life. True love is not built on beauty, wealth, or perfection. True love is built on kindness, patience, sacrifice, and acceptance. Sometimes, when you help someone with anything in return, life rewards you in ways you never imagined. If this story touched your heart and you enjoy inspiring stories like this, Please support us by subscribing to this channel. It's completely free and helps us continue sharing powerful and meaningful stories with you. Also, don't forget to like this video and drop your thoughts in the comment section. We truly love hearing from you, and your support means everything to us. Victor moves through the luxury of his new life like a man walking on glass. The furniture is expensive, but his heart is heavy with the one thing money hasn't bought yet, Amara's sight. It starts with a whisper of hope from a trusted business colleague. There is a way, Victor. A specialist overseas. With a heart racing between fear and faith, Victor kneels before Amara's parents. He doesn't just ask for their blessing to take her across the ocean, he promises them a miracle. Seeing the man Victor has become, their eyes brim with pride. They don't see a son-in-law, they see a hero. The airport is a blur of motion, but Victor's hand is the one constant for Amara. In a sterile consultation room miles from home, a doctor speaks of possibilities. Victor grips her hand so tight it's as if he's trying to breathe his own vision into her. Then comes the silence of the surgery waiting room. Every tick of the clock is a heartbeat. When the bandages finally come off, the world holds its breath. Amara blinks. The darkness shatters. The first thing she sees isn't the light, it's him. The man who stayed. The tears that roll down her cheeks as she looks in the mirror aren't for the years lost, but for the beauty found. At dinner, the roles reverse. As Victor struggles with the high society cutlery, Amara, with her new, bright eyes, smiles and guides him. She is no longer the one being led, they are finally walking side by side. But the miracles were just beginning. One morning, a trembling hand holds a pregnancy test. Positive. The shock hits Victor like a wave of pure lightning. From the dusty streets to a father-to-be, the tears of joy this time are different. Then comes the cry that changes everything. The birth of Godwell. Victor holds his son, a tiny testament to their survival. And soon, the family circle widens with the arrival of Elizabeth. In that hospital room, watching his two children, Victor realizes he isn't just building a business, he's building a dynasty of kindness. The legacy of the humble. Victor is now a titan of industry, signing contracts and commanding boardrooms with the confidence of a king. But his soul still lives in the dusty market. He returns to the old neighborhoods, not to show off, but to lift. The old fruit sellers look at him and see a legend who remembered his roots. At home, the mansion is a school of the heart. He tells Godwell and Elizabeth about the hunger, the cold, and the darkness, not to make them sad, but to make them brave. When Godwell helps a poor classmate, Victor knows the mission is a success. The cycle of poverty is broken, the cycle of grace has begun. Standing at his old, crumbling house with his children, Victor shows them where it all started. Then, they return to the garden of their mansion. Amara leans her head on his shoulder, thanking him for a life she never dared to dream of. As the sun dips below the horizon, painting the sky in colors Amara can finally see, the whole family stands as one. A full circle. From nothing to everything. From darkness to a light that will never go out. Victor sat on the stone wall, his expensive silk tie loosened, his eyes fixed on the horizon. Godwell stood tall beside him, already possessing his father's broad shoulders, while young Elizabeth sat cross-legged, looking at her father with wide, adoring eyes. Godwell, Victor began, his voice a low rumble. You see this estate? You see the cars, the security, the name Godwell etched in gold at the gates? Most people see these things and think I am a lucky man. They think I am a magician who turned dust into diamonds. He held out his hands, palms up. They were clean now, but the skin was thickened by the memory of toil. Before you were born, before your mother could see the color of my eyes, these hands didn't hold fountain pens. They held heavy crates of rotting fruit. I slept on a mat that was thinner than your bedsheets, and I counted my wealth in copper coins that wouldn't buy you a single soda, the shadow of the market. I remember a day, Victor continued, his gaze drifting back to the past, when the rain was so cold it felt like needles. I hadn't sold a single orange. My stomach wasn't just empty, it was screaming. I stood outside a bakery, watching the steam rise from the fresh bread. The baker saw me, a ragged boy with nothing, and he didn't offer a crumb. He splashed dirty water from a bucket to drive me away from his storefront. Elizabeth gasped, reaching out to touch her father's knee. Did you hate him, Papa? Victor smiled sadly, stroking her hair. For a moment, I did. I wanted to grow up and buy his bakery just to tear it down. But then, an old woman, poorer than I was, saw me shivering. She had half a roasted corn. She didn't know me, but she broke it in two and gave me the larger half. She said, "Eat, son. The road is long, but you are not walking it alone." The inheritance of character. Victor turned to Godwell, his expression turning fierce but loving. Son, the world will try to tell you that you are better than others because of your last name. They will bow to you because of the balance in your bank account. But I am telling you now, the moment you believe them is the moment you become poor. He stood up and placed a heavy hand on Godwell's shoulder. Your inheritance isn't this house. Your inheritance is the memory of that woman's half-ear of corn. If you ever see a man shivering, you are the one who provides the coat. If you see a girl sitting in the dark, you are the one who brings the candle. We didn't climb out of the mud to sit on a throne, we climbed out to build a ladder for everyone else. Godwell looked out over the estate, then back at the humble man standing before him. The boy's voice was steady, mimicking the strength of his father. I won't forget, Dad. I'll make sure the name Godwell means the one who helps, not just the one who has. Victor felt a lump in his throat. He looked toward the house and saw Amara standing in the doorway, her silhouette framed by the warm yellow light of the home they had built together. She couldn't hear the words, but she saw the way her son stood, back straight, heart open. Good, Victor whispered. Then the legacy is safe. The black SUVs rolled into the market square like obsidian ships in a sea of rust. The engines hummed, a sound of pure wealth that felt out of place among the clatter of dented pans and the shouts of vendors. As the doors opened, a hush fell over the crowd. Victor stepped out first, his polished shoes hitting the dirt without hesitation. Then came Godwell and Elizabeth. They looked like creatures from another planet, clothes crisp, skin glowing with health, staring at the world their father had survived. Follow me, Victor said, his voice dropping to a low, commanding tone. He didn't lead them to a podium. He led them to a corner where a young boy, no older than 10, sat on a discarded tire, trying to polish shoes with a rag that was more holes than fabric. The boy looked up, his eyes wide with fear and awe. He tried to scramble away, but Victor knelt, completely ruining his $1,000 trousers in the filth. Godwell, Victor called out. Come here. The crowd pressed closer, phones rising to record the moment. Godwell stepped forward, his heart hammering against his ribs. Give me your watch, Victor commanded. Godwell hesitated. It was a masterpiece of engineering, a gift for his birthday. Dad? Give it to him, Victor repeated. As Godwell handed over the timepiece, Victor didn't give it to the boy. Instead, he handed the boy his hand. No, Victor whispered to his son. Don't give him a luxury he can't sell without being robbed. Give him a future. Look him in the eyes and tell him your name. Godwell knelt. The contrast was jarring, the heir to a billion-dollar empire and the boy who hadn't eaten since yesterday. My name is Godwell, the teen whispered, his voice cracking. He saw the grime under the boy's fingernails and felt a sudden, sharp pang of shame for his own comfort. And my father, he used to sit exactly where you are sitting. The market went silent. You could hear a pin drop. Victor stood back, watching as Elizabeth took off her silk scarf and wrapped it around an old woman's shoulders nearby. Look at them, a vendor whispered, his voice caught in his throat. The legend has returned, and he brought the fruit of his labor. Suddenly, a man pushed through the crowd. It was the old baker's son, the one who had once chased Victor away. He looked tired, his bakery crumbling and his eyes shadowed by debt. He recognized Victor. He lowered his head, expecting to be mocked or bought out as revenge. Victor walked up to him. The tension was electric. The crowd held their breath, expecting a clash. Instead, Victor placed a hand on the man's shoulder. The bread I couldn't afford back then. I want to buy the whole shop today. Not to close it, but to make sure every child on this street gets a loaf every morning, paid for by my son. The baker's son collapsed into tears. The market erupted into a roar of cheers that shook the very zinc roofs Victor once slept under. Back in the car, the silence was different. It wasn't the silence of luxury, it was the silence of understanding. Godwell looked at his clean hands, then out at the retreating slums. Dad, he said softly, I thought being a Godwell meant everyone knew who we were. I realize now it means we have to know who they are. Victor looked at Amara, who was watching him with eyes that saw more than just light, she saw his soul. He took her hand, the circle finally complete. The boy from the market hadn't just made it out, he had reached back and pulled the whole world up with him. The grand ballroom was a sea of shimmering silk, clinking crystal, and the cold smell of old money. The air was thick with the perfumes of billionaires and the quiet whispers of people People who looked down on the world from glass towers. Victor sat at the head table, his presence commanding, but his eyes were on his son. Godwell stood backstage, adjusting his cuffs. He wasn't wearing the diamond-encrusted watch he'd almost given away. He was wearing a simple, cheap leather cord on his wrist, a gift from the boy in the market. When the announcer called his name, the room went silent. Godwell walked to the podium. He looked every bit the prince, tall, sharp, and handsome, but as he looked out at the sea of tuxedos, he didn't smile. He didn't offer the practiced, empty grin of a politician. He pulled a small, crushed, and dirty orange from his pocket and set it directly onto the $10,000 mahogany lectern. A ripple of confused laughter moved through the elite. One man in the front row smirked, whispering loud enough for others to hear, "Did he bring us dessert from the gutter?" Godwell waited. He let the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable. The smirk on the businessman's face faded. "This orange," Godwell began, his voice dropping into a resonant, steady bass that vibrated through the speakers, "is the reason you are all sitting here tonight. Because 30 years ago, a boy in a torn shirt sold one just like it to keep his heart beating. That boy is my father." He looked directly at the man who had mocked him. "You see a piece of trash. I see a seed. You see a gutter. I see the soil where the strongest trees grow. Tonight, we aren't here to celebrate how much money the Godwell empire has made. We are here to talk about how much it has spent on things that don't have a price tag." Godwell leaned forward, his eyes burning with a fire he had caught in the slums. "My father taught me that a man's height isn't measured from his head to the ground, but from his heart to his hands. If your hands are only reaching for your own pockets, you are a midget in the eyes of history." He gestured to the back of the room. The heavy gold doors swung. Instead of more waiters, a group of young students walked in, the children from the market schools, dressed in their uniforms, eyes bright with the same hope Victor once had. "These are my board of directors," Godwell announced, his voice rising to a roar. "From this day forward, 20% of every contract signed by this dynasty doesn't go to a bank. It goes to the streets. Because the next Victor is out there right now, shivering in the rain, and I refuse to let him wait 30 years to be seen." The standing ovation. For 3 seconds, the room was a vacuum. Then, Victor stood up. He didn't clap, he just looked at his son with a pride so deep it looked like pain. Amara stood beside him, her eyes glistening, seeing the legacy in high definition. Then, the explosion happened. The old money elite, moved by a raw honesty they hadn't felt in decades, rose to their feet. The applause wasn't just a sound, it was a wave that shook the chandeliers. Later that night, the gala lights were dimmed. Victor and Godwell stood on the balcony of their penthouse, looking out over the city lights. You did well, son, Victor said, his voice a whisper. You spoke for the boy I used to be. Godwell looked at the cheap leather cord on his wrist. I didn't speak for him, Dad. I spoke with him. He's still there. He's in both of us. Victor gripped his son's shoulder. They weren't just a family anymore. They were a movement. As the sun began to peek over the horizon, painting the world in that same orange color from the market, Victor finally closed his eyes and breathed. The struggle was over. The grace had won. Let it become the world's motivation. And if you found a new way to lead with love today? Drop a comment. Share and also subscribe so that the algorithm won't just stop here. Tag your inner circle below. Don't let your people get left behind. Don't forget to like so that people that haven't watched these will get to see these, and people also struggling to help others will see the need to do so, 'cause love keeps the world going. Until next time, catch you on the next one.